Welcome to another provider preview. I'm Julie Hatfield, still president of Beyond the Game Alliance. We're a nonprofit organization that holistically and proactively educates and supports student athletes in preparing for their game, but also life beyond the game. I am so thrilled to have communication strategist, leadership coach, and Enneagram expert, founder of Sailor Suite Life, in the room with me today. Welcome to the room, Nicole.
Great to be here, Julie. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited to support the community.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited to just dig right into your skill set, your craft, and really what you bring to the table, because I know this is such an important piece for every single athlete out there. Let's just be honest, every single adult out there. And we are just so honored to have you on our team and aligned with us in our efforts and our mission to impact these kids. So I would love to hear just a little bit about your backstory. What led you to becoming a communication strategist, a leadership coach, and just bring us up to speed.
Absolutely. So, first and foremost, I believe all athletes are leaders because they lead themselves to greatness. Whether they're the head of the team or they're just a part of the team, they're always leading. And I wasn't necessarily the level athlete that many of the community that we'll be talking to, but I played sports all the way through. I'm a mom to now young adult sons who played sports all the way through. But my path was interesting. I was a strong academic, and I went into the field of law. I actually went to school in upstate New York, not too far from you. And then I went down to Philadelphia and did my law degree. And I live out in Colorado now. And I practiced for several years and found certain things that I was naturally great at and certain things that I was kind of like, ho hum, is this it? Is this it? And I found I was particularly good as a young associate in bringing parties together. So I would get pulled in actually to facilitate conversations. And I'm like, this is so much more exciting. So when the opportunity came, I actually switched out of the everyday of law and moved to a company that I was doing corporate and commercial leasing for. And I switched to the business development side. Fast forward, I worked up to a few hours before my first son was born because he was early and I thought I had indigestion. But no, he made his arrival, all nearly 8 pounds of him at 37 weeks. So, and to meet me, I'm not a big person, but there was an interesting opportunity, right? I think if you keep your eyes open, life throws you opportunities and you get the choice to say yes or no. And I chose to say yes when I really loved parenting my son, and I really loved to grow and think and work and contribute. And I got this opportunity to facilitate back at the company I was at. And they're the ones who actually helped me switch from business development into creating my own consulting business, where I went in and helped facilitate challenging conversations, different parties to get to solutions. And that's where I really learned that communication, effective communication, is the bridge to getting anything done. And that starts with yourself. The first conversation we have every morning is with ourselves. So when I say that all athletes are leaders, the discipline, the hard work that it takes to get to the level in which they're at and succeed at that level, and then transfer those skills into whatever life they want to create with the shifts and the pivots that come in a good life, not an easy one, but a good one. You have to have that conversation with yourself. You have to understand yourself. So my specialty actually came into helping leaders and their teams to communicate better for more productive outcomes, for less unhelpful conflict, for less stress. And people enjoyed work, right? And that's the same. Everyone needs communication. And it's the whole concept of what I'm saying, if it's received at your ear in a way that makes sense to you, then we had a meeting of the minds. But if something happens along the way, generally it's a misunderstanding or miscommunication. But every once in a while, it's a clash. And it may not be an intended one. So the effectiveness of a communication is not measured at the speaker's mouth, but rather at the recipient's ear, right? And if I can help our community, I help my clientele to do better, meaning they can pivot where needed, then I am providing a good return on their time, right? And I would say my best teachers, and I think this will be interesting to the athlete community, is my best teachers are my sons. They're now 18, 20, and 22. And they're all the same gender and they all grew up in the same house. And if I could tell you that I said one thing and it was received the same by all of them and it was success, I would love to tell you that fairy tale, but that is not what happens in raising a family. And I think almost any parent could relate, or anyone who's been around young people. But probably for our athlete community, if they had siblings, certain things their parents said made more sense, or the coaches said, or their teachers said, or support network said made sense to them and not to a teammate, or vice versa. We each have our own individual filters and how we receive the world. And just sharing a little bit of detail, I won't get far in. It's just what I mean by that is pace. How fast or slow do we like to go? Detail. How much detail or information do we want and need to receive in order to make a decision or take the next step? Risk orientation. How comfortable are we with uncertainty? And how much more do we need to make that next step? The same goes to conflict handling. What's our style when it comes to we feel like we're in different places? Are we good and be able to lean in and ask questions? Do we lean out because we don't like conflict? Because a lot of people will say they don't like conflict. It shuts them down. Or do we just accept something that doesn't serve us? And I could go on and on. But that's what I mean about different communication styles. So my success right now in this conversation is measured in how much you and I are connecting and how much you believe understanding the community that I'm making sense to them.
Oh my gosh, so good, Nicole. And I just love that. And what keeps coming to mind as you're talking, and I've heard so many coaches scream this and so many teams say, just communicate. You didn't communicate, right? This is actually a skill that's developed quite young. And whether it's developed or we are very aware of the importance of communication, but it's a skill I feel we don't work on enough. When you just look at your experience with all of the different adults and kids that you have worked with, what do you think is behind that? Why aren't we working on communication more? Any thoughts on that?
That's a great question. And I think you hit the nail on the head because the general mantra is just communicate, say something, say something. But most people aren't armed with how to do it well. And what, again, I mean by well is one that they feel comfortable that they're expressing their true needs, but also the person's receiving what they're saying in the way that it's intended. So I almost think of like a bad game of telephone, but it actually happens most of the time pretty directly, is that the communicator says something, maybe what they meant or not, but it's not received in the way they meant it. And the problem is, and here is the true problem, but I'm not going to offer you a solution. So this is the good thing, is that we don't actually focus on teaching people how well to communicate. We focus on public speaking in school. We focus on how to give a good presentation. We focus maybe on a greeting, like, hi, Julie, nice to meet you. My thing of like 2 and 5, 2 eyes on, 5 fingers, offer your hand. Okay, so that's the start of a greeting, right? And how to stand up in front of your classmates and offer your presentation on World War I don't know, whatever it is, or a book report when you're real young, right? But it's not actually communication for interpersonal dynamics. How to speak to your teacher, how to speak to your coach, how to communicate with your teammates, your siblings, your family. The person at the cash register, well, these days, put your phone down and tap to pay for something, showing my age there a little bit, but the person in the store or your interaction, or even today, a lot of young people are like, oh, I don't want to call. They're used to texting or getting on the computer and quickly, or their phone and ordering something, but they don't have interactions. I make my kids call and make their own dental appointment. I make them call and deal with customer service when their phone isn't working. Very easy to say, hey, mom, will you do it? I say, hey, I'll be here, but you need to do it. Why? Because you have to find your way through the discomfort. I will coach them. I will say, put it on speaker and we can do it together to help clarify. But that is a skill. And that's the same with texting, Slacking, WhatsApping, Snapchatting, whatever you're doing, or long form. There's not a lot of long form today. filling out a questionnaire and writing a few questions is taking that deep breath and shifting your perspective to what do they need to know to make this effective. And we can get into all of that. But again, it's that delta, that missing piece of teaching people what it is and what that rightness of teaching would have been when I was going to school or you were going to school versus kids today, your kids today going to school is pretty different. So we need to take where someone starts and help them to be the most effective version of themselves.
Yeah. It's a two-way street. And what I hear you really say is like, look, presenting, public speaking, just telling is not communicating, right? Communication is, I love what you said. I think kind of the recipient's ear, how it lands in the recipient's ear is as much about how effective you're communicating as the words you're actually saying. Right. So I love that kind of, it's a two-way street. It's a team effort. Communication is a team effort. And that is something our athletes are well versed in, but I think there's just a lot of misconceptions around good, healthy, productive communication. So I appreciate you sharing that. Now, clearly I know why that we brought you onto the table and the team to help service our student athletes in this space. Nicole, I'm curious, what about Beyond the Game Alliance made this a good fit for you?
That's a great question. I would say when I heard you speak, there's such a passion and support and compassion for these athletes that have worked so hard to get where they are and to help them transcend to the next, transition, but also transcend to thrive in whatever comes next. I think you hit the nail on the head earlier because when you said something about, team and communication, and it tends generally for athletes that really thrive, they're in environments in where they feel understood and that they feel they understand, right? So they're thriving usually under a coaching situation and with teammates and supporters that they feel understood as an individual, but also understand what the expectations are, the clarity of goal, what to do if things aren't working, what to do if you're injured, what to do if you need support. The rules of the game, so to speak, aren't as clear in life. And if you move into a different environment, out of being team player, team captain, whatever it is, into a different professional environment, potentially, inside or outside of sports even, the expectations, the environment, the situation is different. And the rules of dialogue can be very different. So what was so attractive to me is to take these disciplined future leaders, right, and help them to transcend, to use those wonderful skills, that drive, that passion, that commitment, and help them to succeed in whatever comes next. And to be honest, whatever comes after that, and whatever comes after that, because if you have good communication skills, there's really no limit. First, for that conversation to have with yourself, like me, like, do I still want to practice law in a traditional way? And the answer was no. Even though I put the time and effort and financial contribution into getting that education, but it was actually taking that opportunity and putting it into the next. And I would say, this is kind of a fun little aside, but I got the opportunity to move to the company I was working with because they asked me if I would come in and interview for an in-house position as a lawyer. So I went to the interview, and in the beginning of the interview, I said, I don't actually want to be your lawyer, but I love what you do, and I'd be interested in other positions. And they were ahead of their time, and they said, we hire for potential and adaptability. So help us to understand where you would fit, and if we can find a spot, we'll hire you. Now, that's a brave and confident communication. Did I feel as confident as I came across? Between you and me, we'll never know. But I was really motivated to do something different. I loved the environment, and it actually worked out really well. But I would say that to to the community, and that how I could support them is really helping them to find that inner voice, clarity, confidence, and then that adaptability to make it work in different situations. So I have a soft spot. My kids were all athletes all the way coming up, maybe not the same level, but they're still athletic. They're young people in college and beyond now. And, we all understand the importance of being athletic and part of teams and working together and how much that means for your health, mind, body, and soul.
Yeah. So good. And I just love that story about you, stepping into that space, knowing what you want and how to communicate that.
Mhm.
Um, I think in as we shift from team and just circling back to the whole idea around you're in your environment, right? When you're in with what you're familiar with, it's a whole different game than when you step out of that comfort zone, right, Nicole? And I remember in those days as I was going through that, I actually thought I was a good communicator. And then I learned quite quickly after college that I had some things to learn about the real world and how to actually convey a message and to be authentic to yourself and to understand what you even want to begin with. And those lessons have been game changing, but it doesn't have to take someone decades to figure out. It's a skill. We can build it now.
Absolutely. And you know what? Everybody, when you ask them, thinks they're a pretty good communicator. Very few people would say to you, oh, I'm a terrible communicator, or I need a lot of work. But most people, even the really good ones, here's the thing, do need tweaks and pivots and their perspective broadened to understand again that their success is really at the recipient's ear, not what comes out of them. And I would just posit, excuse me, for our audience that it is a game. Communication is a game. Life is a game of sorts. Interviewing for positions is a game. Thriving in your job is a game, but it should be a positive, authentic game in which you hopefully feel armed and ready to play and to play well. But it's a different kind of game from the games they're used to.
Yeah. Higher stakes many times. Higher
Mm-hmm.
stakes, especially early on in those entry levels right out of college. So, to that point, what are some things that maybe our student athletes are experiencing right now that may be an indicator for them, Nicole, to get in the room with you or to get some consult with you? What could they be experiencing in their current day to day or just emotionally?
Absolutely. I would say a couple main ways they would feel that I could be of use to them is that either they're feeling confused and unclear about their messaging, what it is they want, or how they're coming across, and they really want to work on that. They're feeling misunderstood, that they feel like they're putting their best foot forward and it's just not quite working out. They're feeling that kind of misalignment or misconnection, right? Because I always say that it's awareness, connection, and then engagement. And you can't really get engaged yourself or the people you're in audience with unless you're aware of your impact and their needs. You feel like a genuine connection is starting to happen. And now they're engaged, they're leaning in, they want to hear about what it is, they get vested in you. So any feeling of stuckness, misunderstanding, lack of clarity, not quite sure what your impact is, and that's where the tool, the Enneagram, which you mentioned earlier and we didn't get into, is a tool that I use in all kinds of settings that people usually are like, oh, Nicole, you've seen into my soul. It's just one of those that gives us a language for understanding ourselves. And then what are your natural needs and style? And how can those be received to best portray you, to best bring you along? And athletes tend to love it because it is a game. I'm giving them kind of some hints on how they play best, how they thrive, how they put themselves out their best. So it doesn't have to be that you're, oh, this is so terrible. It could just be like, it's not quite working. Why isn't it quite working? Right? I'm failing to connect. I feel misunderstood by the people I'm engaging with. My parents don't quite get it right now, what I'm trying to do. It can be a wonderful engagement with a coach like myself to help them to get that clarity, support, and strategy, plus the actions to go forward.
Yes, yes, yes. More of that, please. And I would say, what better place to learn this about yourself now and test it on the court, the field, in your game of play within your comfort zone with the people that you already know, so that when you go out for that first job, when you go out for that high impact, high value conversation, it's not your first rep, right? Let's get some reps in now, get in the room with Nicole, learn your communication style, what you're all about, and it's going to be highly impactful. Man, if I knew it in my early 20s, someone like you existed, Nicole, I would have been all over it.
Well, fantastic. The doors are open, so I hope we'll get some taking of the opportunity. I would love to help them make their best impact.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Our mission is truly to support these athletes in their game and beyond. And we all know how important it comes to communicating well, both on the field and court, field of play, and in career and in family. So, um, if you are watching and you would like to help support these incredible services that we have for our student athletes, there's really three ways for you to do that. One, if you're an athletic director, a leader, a coach, or a parent of student athletes, and you'd like your athlete to be a part of this program, let's start that conversation for them getting fully serviced in all of our coaching modalities, alternative and supportive therapies and services. You can also become an aligned provider, just like Nicole here. If you have a special skill set and a heart for these athletes, it is time to talk. And then lastly, you can become a sponsor. If you're a business owner who has a heart for our athletes and you'd like to be part of the mission to serve them and give back to this community, you can learn all about our ways to give at beyondthegamealliance.org. And if you want to stay in the loop, I'd also recommend subscribing to our YouTube channel so that you can see other incredible interviews happening as they happen here at the Alliance. Again, Nicole, thank you so much for your time today, your skill, and your passion.
Right back at you.